Hello, book lovers. This is a Black Devil. Welcome back to the channel. Visitors, if you happen upon the channel, please feel free to join us. We would love to have you here.
Hangover, I believe it is. And Charlotte's got the shakes. Go on, torture me. Go on, torture me. You like making fun of me, don't you? You think it's fun making fun of me, don't you?
Whatever happened to Baby Jane? Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
And a truer word or a truer sentence has never been uttered before or since. Oh my goodness. Hello, bookies and bookettes. Welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Black Devil, and I am here to give you part one of the recap of the book, My Mother's Keeper by B.D. Hyman. Okay, here we go. My Mother's Keeper by B.D. Hyman. Copyright 1985 by Barbara Davis Sherry Hyman, better known professionally speaking rather as B.D. Hyman, and her husband, Jeremy A. Hyman. Now, a little about B.D. Hyman. B.D. Hyman is a best-selling author, a born-again Christian, and she is also the daughter of legendary silver screen and stage actress Bette Davis. All right, so right from literally the first sentence of this book forward, it is so much I couldn't decide what to talk about and what not. It just kept coming so fast. Now, I already told you that it was 3 parts to this book, and so that's how I'm going to do the videos. I'm putting up part 1 now. Then I'll start part 2 later, but trust, believe, and understand. Woo, it was a lot going on. So grab your snack, sit back, and let's chat. Okay. B.D. Hyman, or like I said, Ruth Davis, no, that's not her name. Her name was Barbara Davis Sherry Hyman, professionally known as B.D. Hyman, was born on May 1st, 1947 in Santa Ana, California, to legendary stage and film actress Bette Davis. And her father, his name is William Grant Sherry. He was some sort of a sports figure. I think he competed in 2 different Olympics or something, but I know he went by the name Sherry. That's how he was referred. Now, B.D. was the only biological child Bette Davis had. Now, getting back to B.D.'s father, he and B.D.'s nurse, Marion, decided, well, apparently they were in some sort of an affair, so they decided to elope. They planned to take B.D. with them, but when the morning that all of it was supposed to go down, somehow the cook found out about it. And so she would not allow B.D. to go with her father and his mistress because she hadn't gotten word or orders from Betty to let the little girl go. And no, Betty couldn't give orders because she didn't know that her husband was leaving her. So when they eloped, Marion, the former nurse, She was only 19 years old, and Sherry, her Betty's father, he was in his early to mid 40s. Now, it was another 14 years later when Betty saw her dad again. But when they did meet back up, she was surprised and happy to see that her father was still married to Mary, and she was his second wife, and together they had 2 children of their own. Now, once everything came to light, Betty, she just refused for anybody to say the word Sherry in her presence or on any of her properties. She just, I think he hurt her really bad because she had been rejected by her father. And I guess a little bit of a lining is that at the time her father walked out, well, at the time BD's father, Sherry, walked out, BD was only 2. So, and when Betty's father walked out, her and her sister, Betty was 7, so she really did have time to form a relationship with her dad, and BD was spared that, or so it was seen. Okay. Shortly after she divorced Sherry, she went and married an actor by the name of Gary Merrill. Merrill adopted BD, and then together they adopted 2 more children, a daughter, Margot, and a son, Michael. Unfortunately, though, Margot had a difficult birth. They never really could understand exactly what the cause was, but around the age of 2, she started exhibiting behavioral problems. And, when Betty and Gary adopted her, and she started all of this, she was 2 years old. And all they know is they think that she was either dropped on her head shortly after birth, or more than likely, they had to use forceps to get her out, and that caused her to develop mental retardation. So with all of that going on, Margot was subsequently placed in a special needs facility where she thrived. But now, as for their relationship, Betty and Gary's marriage, tumultuous would be an understatement, guys, to say the least. All there was constant arguing and physical fighting going on. Betty said now, if, they were in mansions, of course, and she said her room was on the far end of the house. But they would get so heated, the arguments between Betty and Gary. Sometimes she could just put a pillow over her head and drown out a lot of the noise, but sometimes it didn't matter what happened, she still heard it. She tried to stay out of the way as long as that's what it was, but eventually she started hearing licks being passed. So, she would get up and creep down through there to see what was going on. And he would be hitting her mother. Whenever, I think that's probably typical. If a child walks in on something like that, you tend to gravitate toward the one that's getting the biggest damage or whatever. So she said, Betty, when she would see her, she was like, Betty, go on, get out of here, get away. And she would still be like, don't hit my mom or stop hitting my mother and blah, blah, blah. And he just eventually started, it got to the point that he felt free to hit her. So he had problems with keeping his hands to himself. He was hitting on BD and the mother and calling them all out of their names. You know, you just can't be calling my child or our child, because remember, he gave her his last name. But you call her all kinds of bees and sluts and telling her she's no different from her mother. And then Bette didn't make things any better, because she would be like, oh, so you don't think that any man will ever want me? Well, I have you to know. And see, by this time, I forgot to mention this a while ago, BD's father was Betty's third husband. And Gary Merrill was her fourth husband. Okay, when he wasn't being domesticated, violent toward them, he would do outlandish things like walk around the mansion completely naked in his birthday suit. He did not care who was there or when. And she talked about how they lost a lot of help between Gary running around doing things like that and baby Margot doing things. It just got to be hard for them to keep help. She says one time they had this one couple, I think it was a maid and a butler. They worked, and Betty and all of the children seemed to really take to them. In fact, she thought that, that would be the only help they would ever have all their lives. No, apparently Gary wanted them gone, but he couldn't fire them outright because they were doing the job. So he just started walking around in his birthday suit. So one morning, he was upstairs. Betty and the children were downstairs having breakfast, waiting on Gary to join them. All of a sudden, the wife of the couple was screaming and hollering. So the man ran downstairs, still without no clothes on, and got in the kitchen. So the lady's husband, the butler, came down. He told Betty, look, I don't mind working. I like working here. You made it as pleasant as possible, because they were living. He said, but I just can't do this. I cannot have my wife being subjected to all of these shenanigans. Meanwhile, Gary's just sitting there eating. No big deal. So he would do things. He would pick fights. So one night, BD said she fell asleep in the apple orchard. She woke up because she heard her horse. He was in some form of distress or weaning or neighing, whatever it is. She got up to go see what was going on. She gets to the stall, and there Gary is in there in his birthday suit, as usual, but he was whipping the horse. So she picked up something close by. She threw it, and she hit him in the back of his head. He turned around and saw her. So he started charging her. She struck out running. So he couldn't get her. She ended up hiding out. I don't think she went in the house that night. She stayed hidden because she knew she would have to give him time to go to sleep or forget. But then she was hurt the next morning, because when she called Betty to come out to see and to tell her what he did, she just kind of dismissed it. And finally, she did come, and she saw where the horse had been whipped or whatever, and she was like, he was probably drunk. And she was like, why do you do that? Why do you keep being with him, Mother? She said, he just says things that he doesn't mean sometimes, or does things. Either way it goes. Well, they did eventually. Well, yeah, he was her last husband. So they stayed together for a while. Now, in 1961, Betty's mother, Ruthie, passed away. They called her Ruthie. They didn't say mother or mom or moms, none of that. Apparently, Betty had always felt that she had been used and abandoned by her parents. Her father walked out when she was 7 years old. And although Ruthie, she was left to raise the two girls, and she took any and every job she could find. To pay the bills and stuff. And of course, she wanted her children to have the best of everything. So, she was working 2 and 3 jobs a lot of the times just because to put them in the better schools. They moved, to the better schools in the area. Well, Betty, as a teenager, decided that she wanted to become an actress. And Ruthie was behind her all the way. She did any and everything. And then it got to the point to where she had to go to some sort of school. I can't remember now. But Ruthie wasn't making enough money to afford the tuition there. But she worked it out with one of her bosses that, she could stay on, and Betty's sister, Bobby, would help. They would do whatever it took to help Betty realize her dreams. But, I have seen interviews and watched a few clips and stuff since I'm reading this book. And as much as she did go out of her way to see to it that her children were taken care of as best as she could, that all changed once Betty got just the tiniest bit of recognition or success. She went from being Betty's number one fan, so to speak, to being like the worst stage mother known to man, at least towards Betty. And then I think that's probably part of the problems BD and Betty had, because Betty turned that way when it came to BD, although she wasn't a stage mother. But anyway, yes, so it was like Ruthie had to have the best of everything. If Betty had a mink coat, Ruthie had to have a mink coat. If Betty lived in a larger house, Ruthie had to live in a larger house. Well, for most people, a larger house means, I can be in this wing and you can be in your wing, and we don't have to cross paths if we don't want to. No, ma'am. No, sir. That's not Ruthie's idea of a house. She wanted a palace just for her. So Betty and Bobby ended up sharing a home, and Ruthie had the palatial mansion. The problem was she really had just started to make Betty had just started to make a name for herself, and she somehow got Betty to borrow against a contract. Sounds to me like the ink may not have even dried well before she had Betty borrowing money for stuff she knew she couldn't pay for. But because Ruthie had done all of this and, been behind her, Betty felt like she owed that to her mother. And so she would do pretty much whatever Ruthie, I won't say ask, I'll say told her to do, right up until she died. Okay, well now, Halloween, Halloween is October 31st. So October 31st, 1962, the movie Whatever Happened to Betty Jane, starring Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, was released. Now, it was directed by someone named Robert Aldrich. Now, unfortunately for him, part of his job was to keep the peace between the two stars of the movie, between the two ladies, Betty and Jane. But he had to do it day and night, 24/7. Another problem with that arrangement is that both of the women fell in love with this man, but they hated each other. Now, sidebar on that. Now, Bette Davis, this movie came out in 1950. I hadn't even been born yet. But all my life growing up, because my mother is she loves Bette Davis. She loves horror stuff, scary as she is. She is nothing like a good, scary movie for her. So, but she'd always kind of followed Betty and Joan's careers and stuff. And so we would see stuff later on in life, like by the time I did know something about stuff like that, I would see interviews and they weren't best of friends, but I do not believe now, all these years later, that they actually hated each other. Like I said, I don't think they, hung out after movies. They certainly didn't exchange pleasantries or phone calls and stuff. But I don't think it was as bad as the media tried to make it be at some point or another. So that's that on yes. So yes, that man had to keep the peace, and both of them swore that the only reason he was with the other is because he was required. Well, when the movie ended, all three of them were by themselves. So that could not have had anything to do with his feelings for either one of the women. Now, Betty introduced her daughter, Bette, to Joan Crawford. Bette reached out to shake Joan's hands. Joan snatched her hand away, put it behind her back, looking Bette up and down all the while. Ew. Okay, then, Joan, and then, okay, she did speak, hello, dear. And then she went on to say to Bette, do you see those two girls sitting over there on the couch? Those are my daughter. Those are my daughters, rather. She said that under no circumstances should you ever speak to my daughters. You see, my daughters have been carefully brought up. They have been sheltered from all of the wickedness in the world. And I know you haven't. So, just don't have anything to do with them. Well, that didn't sit too well with Betty or BD, but that's just one of the times that they agreed, BD and Betty. Now, they said on the movie set, though, Joan had a Pepsi cooler, because at the time, I think, in real life, Joan was married to the CEO or the president of some sort of Pepsi. He worked for PepsiCo. So Joan had a cooler delivered to the set every day. Supposedly, it was stacked with Pepsis. But according to BD, Joan always had a full bottle of vodka on the set every day by her side, day in and day out. But now, this was kind of sad. Well, it is sad, it was disturbing. One of the worst fights Betty ever had was with her sister, Bobby, her one and only sibling. She treated Bobby like she was less than dirt. I mean, a third-class citizen, not even a second class. Now, when Betty got pregnant with BD, Bobby just kept on and on and on telling her to name the baby after her, name the baby after her. This is the only time thus far in this book, this is the only time Betty has ever relented and did what Bobby asked of her. But she may as well not, because when she named her Barbara Davis Sherry Hyman, that is BD's name. Well, you know, she wasn't a Hyman until she got married. But almost the minute after she was born and they found out she was okay, healthy, blah, 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 Betty absolutely forbid anyone to call her Barbara or Bobby. She said it was just an ugly name, and she hated the name Barbara so bad that to her, she said, I don't even like the little cutesy nicknames. Babs, please. So, from the time she was born, more or less, she has always gone by BD. It was like when she forbade anyone of speaking Sherry's name around her. You couldn't say Barbara. So that's what happened with that. But now this particular, getting back to the fight they had, it all started because Betty, Bobby was their maid. She was the cook, really. She was the cook. So one night at dinner, I forgot what it was because I'm not a big meat eater, but I think it was some form of prime rib or whatever expensive cut of steak it may have been. But anyway, whatever it is, Bobby cooked it the way she had always cooked it. She cooked it to everybody's satisfaction. Well, this time Betty decides that, I paid a lot of money for this expensive cut of meat, and you didn't cook it right. And Bobby said, well, I cooked it the way I always have. And BD looked up and said, yes, Mother, you like your steak like this. So Betty just went on and accused the kids of all taking Bobby's side, this, that, and the other. She got worked up. She shoved that plate across the table, and it almost fell. Bobby stuck her arm out to keep the plate from falling. And Betty got mad about it. So she hit Bobby. And Bobby, she had picked the plate up. She was trying to take it and I guess put it away, throw it away, or whatever she had to do. But when she got up, Betty hit her again. And so they ended up fighting. The plate of food was dropped and food was everywhere. The plate was all broken up. She pulled her hair and Bobby was like, Betty, let go, you're hurting me. That seemed to really set Betty in motion. Boy, she got a big kick out of that. So they accused each other of hurting each other, but it sounds like that was more or less. I think Betty probably did hurt Bobby, but she had to have, she tried to justify, she's always this or she's always that. So after dinner and everything settled back down, BD went to her Aunt Bobby's room and she was like, Aunt Bobby, why do you put up with that from Mother? Because now you got to remember, this is all BD has ever seen between Betty and Bobby is some sort of strife. Why do you insist on letting Mother do that to you? And so Bobby sat her down, and she explained to her, look, I've always known since I was a little girl that Betty was the important one of us kids. She said, like, if Ruthie had money to buy 2 dresses, instead of giving them each a dress, both of them were Betty's. She said, if she had money to get 4 dresses, they would get 2 apiece. But that, she didn't have money like that, because like I said, Ruthie was, she wasn't rich or anything when the kids were growing up. And she said, I just always have known that it really didn't matter. What I want didn't matter. What I thought, how I felt, none of that mattered to Ruthie or Betty. But I know she means well. And she told her about when Bobby married one of her husbands, Betty acted so happy that Bobby was getting married and this, that, and the other. Well, they went on, and she said that this particular husband was an alcoholic, but he had stopped drinking. He was attending Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was working on his sobriety. When they returned from the honeymoon, though, Betty had a case of, I think she said it was wine, delivered to their house while they were gone. And when Bobby asked her why she did that, she said, he's a struggling alcoholic. And then Betty, I forgot. Oops. I forgot. Now, I don't know if the man started back drinking or not. They never did say. It's just that, Bobby felt like that was wrong of Betty because she knew that this man had issues with alcohol. So, a little while later, she told, when she left Bobby's room, Betty told her to come in her room. So she went in there, and she sits Bette down and tells her that her Aunt Barbara was a nutcase. She said, and Ruthie was let me see, how did she say? I never heard of this expression, but I have the feeling that I know about what it means. She referred to Ruthie as being a flibberty-gibbet. And she said that she believes had she been born a boy, her dad never would have left the house. He would have just stayed in the marriage. But because she was a girl, she was headstrong and loud. There was nothing very feminine about Betty growing up. And she wasn't necessarily ever thought to be the most attractive person, according to BD and Betty. But she said, she didn't blame the father for leaving Ruthie, because Ruthie was a flibberty-gibbet. But she says that she really and truly believed that had she been born a boy, her dad would have stayed. He went on and became a lawyer, but I don't think he was a real successful one. But anyway, she said that Ruthie and Bobby both had been in the loony bin more than once. It was nothing for them to have to, go away for a while. And who was fitting that bill? I was. And this is just what it was. And she just felt, and I can understand that. She said that Bobby, according to Betty, she told BD that Bobby was melodramatic and jealous of her. I mean, I don't know now about no jealousy. If she getting her butt whipped whenever you feel the need, Betty, I highly think it was out of jealousy. Bette felt that Bobby was afraid of Betty. She knew she couldn't really say anything against Betty to her face or to Ruthie about Betty. That was rough. Yeah, I just talked about them being in the, according to Betty, she referred to it as the loony bin. Okay. Now, when Bette turned 16, all she wanted for her birthday that year was to get her last name changed back to her biological father's last name. So she went from Bette Merrill, Bette Sharon, to Bette Merrill, to back to Bette Sherry. And, they were divorced by that time. But, yeah, she did. She took her father's last name again. But here's the thing about Bette. I'm not understanding. But, okay. On a press tour for the movie, whatever happened to Baby Jane, Bette was set up on a blind date. The man she was to go on the date, the man she was set up with, rather, eventually became her husband, Jeremy Hyman. They married that same year that Bette turned 16. Jeremy is from Europe. I think he's from England. And I think he was working in some part of the industry, but he wasn't on screen a lot. So, that's what it was. Let me see. Hold up, lady. Yeah, I can't understand, guys. In the first place, Betty, why would you permit your 16-year-old daughter to be married? Now, I know that it was commonplace at one time for people to marry at that age, especially if the girl was pregnant. But Bette was a woman of wealth. But for whatever reason, Betty consented to Bette getting married to Jeremy. But now, and then here's the other thing. Jeremy is 13 years older than Bette. So she was 16 and he was 29 when they got married. Now, leading up to the wedding, all Betty and Bette did was argue right up until the day she married Jeremy Hyman. Well, bookers and bookettes, this concludes the first part of this book, My Mother's Keeper. And I'm trying my best to try to condense it down, but it was just too much stuff. I had taken too many notes. I'm like, oh no, because it literally at some point seemed like every sentence I felt needed to be talked about. So, but now and then, like, okay, that's the heaviness of Bette Davis. But she has some funny things going on. Like, one time she decided, because she never was a cook, but when she married Gary, she decided to become a dutiful housewife, whatever all of that means. And she decided to start cooking. And she talked about how Betty would have them scavenging up and down seasides and shores and hills pulling seaweed. And she left it with somewhere one day when she came back. Betty had an arm full of cookbooks. And she decided that she was going to learn how to make seaweed pudding. And she did something. But It never was good. Hold on. She just could never get that. And so BD talked about how bad it tasted. It was awful. But one day they were at dinner and she was like, God, can you imagine a lot of this stuff? It just goes and falls by the wayside. Oh, it's so good. Who wants more? Everybody was scared because nobody wanted it anymore. But they didn't want to admit they didn't want it anymore. She made somebody eat some. But BD thought that she was going to hound her and try to force her to learn to like it. She said, but Mother she didn't ever make me eat that, although it was on the menu from time to time. Nobody ate it but her. Like that. Seaweed pudding, really? I guess it's edible, but I just never would think to eat it. And then what else was funny? One time, they were coming home from a vacation or something. And BD said, for all of the faults Gary Merrill had, he was a superb driver, just excellent. And Betty drove, but she shouldn't have been. She hit more mailboxes and dinged more cars and this, that, and the other. And I don't know what it was about this particular trip. Gary was behind the wheel, and he was just driving, and Betty said, oh, you think you're doing so good, huh? Watch, I can back out of this driveway with my eyes closed if I want to. They went to a gas station just so Betty could get in the driver's seat. She backed out into traffic, but nobody got hit. But then she decided, well, you just always want to be the show off. I'll show you. She put that foot on that darn pedal, the gas pedal. And everybody's mouths was wide open. She ran all up on curves and everything. And even BD said, at some point, look, okay, if we just have to go places, can he please be the one doing the driving? From that day on, he was. And I'm like, it's just so dark and sad that I try to find some comic relief when I read heavy books like this. But those two things I thought was funny. But anyway, this is the conclusion of part 1 of the recap or review of the book, My Mother's Keeper. Now keep in mind, bookers and bookettes, this is a memoir. So we have to take things with a grain of salt. But if any one of these things are true that I've read so far, Betty wasn't too different off screen as she was on screen. And I think that had a lot to do with the breakdown of their relationship. But let me tell you guys, I still have not thought of anything to do for a giveaway. I still know what I'm gonna give away. I just don't know. Do you all have any ideas or suggestions I could come up with we could do so that we can have a little contest or a giveaway? Please, if you know anything, feel free to let me know down in the comments. And subscribers, thank you for being subscribers. And don't forget to like and share the video. Visitors, should you happen upon the channel, please don't forget, or please feel free rather, to join us. We really would love to have you with us. And then should you all honor me with comments, and I hope you do so respectfully. And lastly, don't forget to make sure your notification bell is on so you will know every time I upload a video. And let me see, is there anything else I mentioned about the giveaway? This and that. Oh, no, I guess that's it. So, bookers and bookettes, remember this. As long as there are books around, there's always something to read. Bookers, bookettes, book lovers alike. Be safe. Thanks for watching and or listening. And God bless. P.S. Y'all like my little clips I'm learning how to incorporate in my videos. Okay, I'll talk to you later on, guys. Y'all have a blessed day.